Chuck here. And here's what I want to do in this particular one. This is a goal here, a project that we've been working on for a course that I'm part of, but it's a good challenge for us to think about. It's the classic giving change, the change maker assignment, which you can find online in tons of various formations and formats. And so we're going to create one in Scratch. And the idea being that a lot of you are comfortable in Scratch, you understand how Scratch works, you like the block system, and then compare that to Python and understand the parallels from Scratch to Python. And one of the biggest things that I want you to take away is hopefully by the end of this that you'll realize that while Scratch is amazing and wonderful and it's a great tool to get kids engaged in coding, when we start to understand text-based coding in a format in a coding language like Python, we can do more complicated, robust programs and a lot less work. And so I want you to be able to kind of see those parallels. So what we have here is a simple task where we want to ask the user the price of an item, and we're going to keep it simple in the terms of they're going to input the price of the item in pennies and cents. And then we're then also going to ask them how much money they've provided. What is the dollar amount they've given, also in cents. And then the program then is going to kick out the change in terms of $5 bills, $1 bills, quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. And we want to be able to let you know what you're going to receive. So we're going to keep this simple. Know that in Scratch, yes, we could use graphics. We could get quarters showing. We could get dimes showing. We could get pennies showing. We can do all that. But for the sake of this, we're just going to show the blocks of just a cat speaking as if we're printing in Python. And that's very similar. And if you've seen the prior videos of me comparing Scratch to Python, you'll see that. So let's get started here. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to keep the cat. We're not going to worry too much about the graphics of this particular thing. And we're going to come down here to our events. And we're going to click here that when the green arrow is clicked, I'm going to use a broadcast signal. And we're just going to make this first one a new one. And we're going to call it reset. This is just going to kind of reset all the stuff that we can do. Eventually we can start to displays and have a registration. We can do lots of things. But just know I'm building this in here so that we can become more robust down the road. So what we're going to do then is when clicked, we're going to broadcast reset. Okay, and when I receive reset, we're going to then start our actual program here for the cat. And so as we get going, we need the cat to ask us what is the price of the item that we're paying for. So we're going to go to sensing and we're going to go to ask and we're going to type in here, please enter the price of the item in cents. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a space here afterwards so we have a little bit of a break. There we go, item in cents. All right, and we're going to go down here and we're going to create a variable. And this variable here, we're just going to call the cost. This is going to be the cost of the item. All right, now for the sake of this particular tutorial, I'm going to leave all the variables showing. Remember, you can turn those on and off with this check box here, but we're going to keep this on so you can actually see the numbers calculated as we go through. All right, so with that in mind, we're then going to set the cost to the answer of this particular answer. All right, so whatever the person enters, that's going to be the price of the cost. We're just going to put a wait block in here for 1 second. And then we're going to then ask another question for them to give us. All right. And this is going to be, please enter the amount you paid in cents. Okay, so if it's $1 that they had the item cost, that's 100. And say they give a $10 bill, we would put 10,000 in there, or yeah, and away we would go. All right, and we're going to set up the same kind of structure here. So we're going to go to variables. All right, and we're going to make another variable. We're going to call this payment. This is what the person is paying. So we are going to set here. We're going to do this drop down. We're going to go to set the payment. All right, and we're going to make payment this answer that it answers right here. Okay, we're then going to make one more variable. We're going to do our first calculation here, and so I am actually going to call this one change. This is going to be what we need to provide back to the person. So we're then going to set change, all right, and we have to do a little bit of math here. So we're going to go drop down to our operator block where we can do all our calculation. There is a subtraction one here. We're going to drag that bad boy right in there, and we're going to head to our variables, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to put in what they paid. Oops, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's easier to do this outside and then add it in. We're going to take payment minus cost. All right, and we're going to stick that right in there. All right, and just for the sake of time, we're going to have them think, and then let's have our guy say right here. Let's say your change is, so we know what that number is going to be. Yes, we're going to see it here in this block, but let's just have them say it, because in Python we can have them print that same comment. So how we combine variables and text is we're going to use this green join that we've learned in some previous lessons. And so I'm just going to type in here, your total change is. I'm going to make sure I leave a space. I have to manually put a space in here, otherwise it'll all just run together. And so your total changes, and then we're going to go to our variable and we're going to add what the change block is. So now if we run this, let's just see. I type in 100 for a dollar, and then I'm going to put in $10, so 10,000. All right, let's see. And there we go. Okay, so we've got there. All right, but I did it. I keep saying 100, right? But it's 1,000. So $9,900 is what the change is going to be. That's a lot of change. So we need to kind of make sure we maybe pick some smaller numbers as we go through. But we can see that here is what the change is going to be. We can see the variables posted here, just so we can see in the backdrop how this is going to work. All right, so now let's go ahead and rock and roll here with our next step. Let's start to create the calculation. So I'm just going to put a wait block in here just so we have a chance to actually see what the change is. I'm just going to do 1 second for now. And we're going to then put a say command. And I'm just going to put in here, let's go with, I'm going to do a say for 2 seconds. Here is your change. And just because I think it's kind of funny, let's do a think for a second. All right, and here we go. Variable number 1, we are going to do $5. All right, so we got our $5 variable. Okay, so what we're going to do here, this is when we start to do some calculations, the very things that you're going to learn with the operators in Python here in just a little bit. The first thing we have to do is we have to create what our $5 variable is going to be. So one of the things we have to figure out in this particular task is, as we calculate change, every time we use a denomination, we've got to remove that from the overall total to continue to reduce, to make sure that we're giving the proper change as we go from $5 all the way down to a penny. And so what's going to happen here is we're going to do some operations within here. And there is a block, okay, this one right here, this absolute of. We're going to drag this out, but as opposed to absolute, we're going to pick the floor. So what the floor is going to do, if we look at our coding in Python, we have, and I'll show you this later, so don't panic when you look at all this, all right? When we use 2 of the division signals, we create a floating division, all right? And what this does is this returns, just as I have here in the comments, the integer value. It gets rid of the decimal. As we go to do the code. So we're going just with the integer of this calculation. So we want the floor of, all right? And we have to do a division here to figure out what their change is going to be. So I'm going to drag this division block over now. I'm going to stick that in there, all right? And what we're going to put in is the change, okay, the amount of change that we have, and we're going to divide that, right, by the $5 amount, so 500. We're going to divide that by 500, and we're going to stick that right in here. So this is going to take our overall change divided by 500, whatever that integer is. We're just going to have the cat here say that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and say this particular thing. So we're going to use the $5 variable. We're going to say $5. Okay. And now what we're going to do from here is we now have to calculate that out. So what we're looking for now is we need to do a calculation that's actually going to calculate what the remainder is of this division. So here we calculated the integer. Now we need the remainder part of it, and that's what we're going to use for the next part. So how this works here is we're just going to go and we're going to drag this set. All right, and we're going to change this from the $5 to change. So now we're going to set change, okay, to, and we're going to use the mod block here. So this mod, okay, just like in Python, which we'll talk about. Oop, I don't know where that went. What this is going to do then is going to return just a remainder value. Okay, so this is a modulus, this, some mathematics that I've been learning. And so what we're going to do here with this mod is this mod block right here with this $5 amount is we're going to then drag the change, all right, and we want the mod out of 500. So it's going to calculate that variable for us, and we're going to put that in right there. So what's going to happen then is our change variable is going to adjust it. You're going to see it reduce once that happens. So let's take a look at this here. Let's just run to make sure that we are on the right track. I'm actually just going to put a wait block in here so I don't forget. We're going to say that. We're going to wait. All right. And let's go ahead and run this here. So just so you can see the drop, let's go with, let's do the same thing. I'm going to do 100, but I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4. So that way you should be able to see a reduction, but you're going to see this change. See how the payment, okay, here's our change, but once it calculates, all right, we should start to see a drop. Okay, so you can see there, did you see how the change dropped? So we were going to use two $5 here. That was 10. Okay, that reduced it 1,000 from that equation, so now we're down to 134. You can see how that's reduced as we've gone on. So then we're going to follow this pattern. So this is what I want you to see. With Scratch, hopefully it's starting to make sense, but you can see how this is going to get very lengthy very quickly. And we haven't even added like if we wanted to actually show like a quarter, a dime, or a dollar bill and the graphics and the costume changes and things like that. But what we can do that does make life a little bit easier in Scratch, and I'm sure you're like, oh, it's not too bad, right? Is we can take this particular block, set of block right here. I'm going to pull this over. All right, and we are just going to duplicate this. And so I know I'm going to need one for there's a dollar, here's a quarter, here's a dime, nickel, and then a penny. So we're just going to continue to follow this process. If I drag this down here, okay, I need a new variable here. So we had $5, but now we need a new one, okay? So I need to go to a variable, and I'm just going to make the rest of these $1. All right, then we have quarter. We have dime, nickel, and penny. And we're just going to follow the same process like we did, right? So here we are. Here's your change, $5. Forward change mod, wait 1 second. Okay, so now we're going to make this $1. And as opposed to 500, we're going to make this 100 because a dollar is 100 pennies, right? Not 500 pennies. We're going to do this. All right. And then we're going to do this by the 100. And we're just going to follow this same process. I'm actually going to squeeze this down. Okay, I know it's going to be a little hard to see here. Okay, so now we've got our dollar. And now I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to make this a quarter. All right, so we know this to be 25. We're going to drag this quarter over here. Also doing this by 25. Okay, then we have our dime. And we know a dime is 10. Changing this variable here. And then we're going to make this 10 here. And then we've got to make this a nickel. So this is going to be 5. And then we're going to say nickel. Make that 5. And then last but not least, we have the penny. So thank the Lord for the duplicate block, right? Otherwise, we'd be here all day. And so now we're going to do that. And we're going to go here. So now when we run this, all right, so let's say the item is 347 pennies. And for some reason, I give $8.35 here. Let's just watch this calculate. You can watch it right here. So there's our change. And this is going to change here as it calculates through. Okay, so we can see here. So we're going to get back $4, 3/4. We should have 1 dime, no nickels. We probably should have 3 pennies, right? So it goes through. There it is. So now we can see how that looks with our change being now down to 0 as it calculates its way all the way down. All right, so that's how we do it in Scratch. If I magnify this out, I mean, this is just one simple way. You can see it's a lot of blocks, right? And we could go through and I could show you what it could look like here as we look at this code. I mean, I've done one here ahead of time. I don't have it all the way done. I'm looking at coins and creating some sprites. This one here is using some change. I took this guy's original project. He didn't have exactly what I wanted, but what he had was he had the quarter, the dime, the nickel, and the penny. So now I just need to add the dollar and $5, and then I recreated this code that you've just seen here. So I just used his sprites. So I want to make sure he got credit. So let's say I do 654, and I give that kind of weird money amount. So you won't see the dollars pop up on the screen, but you'll start to see hopefully the quarters here in just a minute. There's the quarters and the nickels, and if there's any dimes or pennies, I don't know what I had in that equation there. All right, but you can start to see what we can give then as equations. So in these costumes, right, I can have these different shapes of when I give 1, 2, 3, or 4. Same thing with the dimes as we work through. And as we have those, then we can go in and start to write code based on equations of how much change we want to give and switch costumes and stuff like that. So here is the Scratch. Now let's convert and jump over into Python so you can see what the Python looks like. All right, so I'm just going to recreate this code here that I wrote, but at least this way you can see how this kind of comes to be. And so what I've got here is just a simple input command, and I'm making sure that the input is converted to an integer. That's what this int is going to do. So we have an input. Please enter the price of the item in cents. You'll know here that I had to put a space in between, otherwise it rubs right up together. So you at least have that built in there with your commas. Remember, with your quotes, you can do single or double. Pick your poison. I can see here that I'm using bolt, and that's not really good coding things to do. So there's the cost, all right, which looks just like, all right, on our Scratch program. Let me go back to what we just created here. And so you can see. All right, so cost, our cost variable here in Scratch is enter the price item in cents, and that's what we have here. We've created a variable cost, and we're adding that in cents, and we're getting that in an integer value. So we can see the similarities with these two blocks is this line of code right here. Okay, and then we're doing the same kind of thing. I'm just going to copy both of these over as we get going here. All right, so we do the same thing, creating a variable called payment. Once again, an integer, asking the amount that they paid in cents. So we have that. And then we're having the code here of another variable of change. Change is going to be payment minus cost. And so if we look here at Scratch, this is what we've done here. Okay, so we've set the cost. Here's our line 1, our cost variable. Here's our payment variable blocks. All right, and then we did that calculation that changes payment minus cost. So you can see that, let me just copy these so you can see where we are in the Scratch. I'm going to add a comment. Okay, so these lines of code, go to this point right here. All right, so I'm just going to expand this out so you can see the chunks of where this actually goes. So all this code right here lines up. These 3 lines are equal to these scratch blocks. Okay, that's what we've got there so far. All right, and then we're going to print what this is. Okay, so I've got this line here that just is going to then tell us, all right, that our change is going to be whatever our change variable is. Okay, and then it's also going to just calculate that. So we've got our print, which is equal to our say command. Your total change is, I got the change variable, and you're going to receive the following denominations. So that is where this block is right here. That's what this block is. Okay, and then we've got our calculations, all this down below. All right, and in Python, okay, I'm just going to copy all this over now because it all runs the same. As we talked about, once we kind of know what math to do, and for me that's the hardest part, is understanding the math. We're going to use the double division for floating division. That gives us just the integer, which is what we were doing here in Scratch, okay, with this floor command here. And then we're using the modulus, which is returning the remainder value. That's what this mod block is. So all we're doing here is we're going to print, okay, change, just the floating division of 500, and it's going to give us that number. Whatever that number is, we're just going to say that many $5 bills. And we're just repeating that process. And then we're changing the variable change that we had up here, okay, to the remainder that's left. So change the modulus, right? That's this green block right here is percentage sign of 500. So now the variable's changed. And we're going to do that same process. You can see all the way on down. Okay. One thing I didn't do is I didn't change the variable after 1 because we don't need to see that. I added it down here in Scratch just so you can see the variable amount at the end is at 0. And so this stuff here, okay, I'm going to copy because that block, okay, is all of this. So I'm going to squeeze this down. All right. So when we wrote that code, that is the equivalent of all these scratch blocks. Right? So you can see the difference in terms of what we wrote in Python versus Scratch. So it's just a preference. It's part of the learning process, but at least you can see how that all works. And while Scratch is great and visual, and I think it's a great way to help kids, the Python becomes much smoother. So when we go to run this Python code, let's go ahead and run this so you can see, all right, what it looks like. I'm just gonna call this change maker. All right, so if I say it's 39 cents and I pay 347, all right, it tells us our change right there and then breaks it all down. So this is pretty much identical to what we're seeing here when we show the variables. So I hope you find this helpful. I hope it makes some sense. This is a lot. This took me time more to learn about the math and which calculation symbols to use for the operators for Python. And then Scratch, it's just a matter then of sequencing it. So what you might find is a lot of times I'm starting to find that it's easier to create the code in Python and then convert it to Scratch. I used to be the opposite when I started learning Python. I used to have to do stuff in Scratch and then write in Python. So the more you get to do this, the more comfortable you're going to be. All right, my friends, as always, stay awesome.